I am a documentary photographer, and I've decided getting in this line of work because I love telling stories, stories that would otherwise be unknown. The story I want to tell you today is a story that takes place thousands of kilometers from here, but you will soon realize that in reality, this is a story that is affecting all of us. In the last few years, I've traveled around the world looking for people that were forced to leave their land because of climate changes. There are a lot of people going through this, tens of millions, but you don't hear much about them because they are like a ghost. Their status has no legal recognition, and no one is taking care of them. I want to tell you their stories today because in a not-too-distant future, their story could become our story. And what happens today in these countries could happen here as well, in Europe. Since I'm better used to express myself with images rather than through words, I believe the best way to tell you this story is taking all of you with me on a journey. I want you to look through my camera's lens. Here we are. Welcome to Mongolia. Here, the thermometer goes down to minus 50 degrees Celsius, and we are driving northwest, looking for a family of shepherds that, like many others here, managed to live in this climate. These winters, so harsh and snowy, are called Zud in Mongolia, and we reached this family after a 600 kilometers journey, and it takes 9 hours to drive the last 20 kilometers, and it was not easy. In this severe climate, the Tsamba family is living along with this flock of sheep that gets decimated every day by the extreme cold. But we are coming back to Mongolia in a few minutes. Now I want to take you to Bangladesh, the other country which is portrayed in my work. Are you okay? Well, I hope you can swim, because we are in South Bangladesh here, the most densely populated country in the world. And if global warming keeps up with this pace, before the end of the century, around 20% of the country will be submerged by the sea, and millions of people will be forced to leave their land and emigrate. Let's go back to our shepherds. They are forced to leave their countryside because their livestock is killed by the winter cold. Every day, harsher and harsher. Meanwhile, the people in Bangladesh is forced to leave their villages because they are struggling with floods, hurricanes, and the rising level of the sea. What do Mongolian shepherds and Bangladesh farmers have in common? They are all forced to leave their land because of climate changes, and they are all too poor to move to the rich Western countries. So what can they do? There's only one option. They have to move to the bigger cities inside their own countries, such as Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia and Dhaka in Bangladesh. Poor cities where they can only live a miserable life. These people fleeing from their lands are called environmental migrants. This is a brand new phenomenon, which is growing fast, but still relatively unknown. But in about 40 years, 1 man on 45 will be an environmental migrant. As we know, 2008 marked a new frontier. For the first time that year, the number of people living in cities exceed the number of people living in the countryside. The urban population is going to increase. Many international organizations believe that in 2050, there will be around 250 environmental migrants on our planet. As I said, all these migrants are not moving to rich countries. They are all moving to urban areas inside their own country, such as the already overcrowded and miserable slums. and cities double together with misery. As it often happens, poor and fragile people pay the highest price. Around 90% of this huge migration does not involve industrial and developed countries, but the poorest countries. I was asking to myself where the environmental migrants come from and where do they go. This is the reason why I decided to travel with them to tell their stories. Let's see now some few pictures taken during the last 2 years, and let's go back to the Tsamba family in the Mongolian steppe. This family, like many others in Mongolia, lives from stock breeding. They move their tent looking for pastures, but with such harsh winters, there are just a few left. Consider that in the cold winter of 2011, more than 8 million livestock died in Mongolia, and therefore thousands of shepherds had to move to the capital, Ulaanbaatar. In this picture, we can see Mrs. Tsamba carrying a dead sheep killed by the cold. The family can't even eat it because the meat is no longer edible. Night is falling. Mr. Tsamba is taking an exhausted sheep in his tent because otherwise it will certainly die from the cold. And you see, his wife takes care of the weakest sheep in her tent. She gives them water and keeps them warm. But in the morning, she throws them out. And it's far from easy because the sheep now are used to the warmth of the tent, and outside is terribly cold. Again, we can see Mrs. Tsamba with her son. They just woke up, and the kid is hugging a lamb that slept with them. Otherwise, it would have died from the cold. This is the daily life of the Tsamba family, desperately trying to survive in the extreme cold with their flock, halved in 3 years, from 2,000 livestock to 1,000. I met them in 2011. It was 2 years ago. I worried about them. How many sheep do they have now, and where are they living? Most probably, they are now living here, in Ulaanbaatar, the capital of Mongolia, whose population doubled in the last 20 years. Therefore, all around the city, thousands of tents spring up like mushrooms. The tent is the only property left for the former shepherds. And what can these poor shepherds do for a living here in Ulaanbaatar? They live in a miserable condition, in huge suburbs with no drinking water, no urban planning, no welfare. Some of them search for food in the garbage dumps, like this woman. I want you to hear her story directly from her voice, as I did. Now, let's go back to Bangladesh, where the people that need to leave their flooded villages arrive in the capital, Dhaka. The capital of Bangladesh is one of the most populated in the world, 15 million inhabitants, likely to reach the quota of 50 million in 2050. It's very crowded. And Dhaka is often flooded as well. Every year, more than 300,000 people are moving to the city, and most of them are environmental migrants. They lost everything. They have no job. They live out of charity. They can only build a shack to take shelter, and this is a slum called Korail, where more than 70,000 people live today, An incredible mass of people turning the lake in an open-air latrine. But there are people that are even less lucky. They build shacks along the railroad. And along the railroad, I met this woman. And she told me the story of how she moved to the city.
ইসলামপুর আমরা মনে করেন বাড়ি রয়েছি থাকা পরে রাতে শুয়েছি শোয়ার পরে মনে করেন শুয়েছি শোয়ার পরে দেখি কি শন শন করতেছে পরে আমরা উঠছি উঠতে আসার পরে দেখি কি গাং ভাঙ্গা লয়ে যাইতেছে গাং ভাঙ্গে লয়ে যাইতেছে গাং ভাঙ্গে যে লয়ে যাইতেছে তখন আমরা ওতে কিরে আমরা গাং ভাঙ্গে যেতেছি আমরা বাড়ি করতে লয়ে যেতে কই যাবো আমরা পরে এর মধ্যে আল্লাহ কি কাম করে বাড়ি ভেঙে লয়ে গেছে পরে আমরা আমার এক সন্তান ছিল পেটে আর এক সন্তান ছিল কাকে এক সন্তান পেটে ছিল আর এক সন্তান কাকে আসছিল পরে সন্তান নিয়ে আমার স্বামীকে আমি হারাইলাম হারার পরে তখন আমি কই থাকবো কই কী করবো তা আমি বলতে পারি না কিন্তু আগে ভালোই ছিলাম আগে ভালোই খাইছি আগে ভালো কিনছি স্বামী থাকতে কিন্তু তখন এখন কই থাকবো কই কী করবো কোনো জায়গা নেই বাড়ি নেই ঘর নেই কই থাকবো পরে আল্লাহ রহমত করে এই দুটো পোলাপান নিয়ে একটা পেটে বাচ্চা লইয়া আর কাকে একটা সন্তান লইয়া করে আমি আয়া করছি আমি পরে ঢাকার দিকে জামালপুর আইসা হেরা করে ট্রেনে উঠলাম ট্রেনে উঠার পরে আমি ঢাকার দিকে আইসা হেরে রেল লাইনের পাশে একটু ঘর লইলাম ঘর নিয়ে হাইরে পরে একটু রইলাম বলে দেখি ভালো মতন থাকতে পারি ভালো মতন খাইতে পারি নি তখন দেখি যে না চলতে পারি না খাইতে পারি একটু আর কি রেল লাইনের পাশে একটু জায়গা লই আর কি এই রয়েছি দুইটা ছেলে নিয়ে একটু জায়গা লইয়া হামলা দিলে রয়েছি
Well, I visited Mongolia and Bangladesh. In a few days, I'll be in Kenya. I chose to start with these three countries to offer a wide picture of the different effects of global warming. I slept in a tent at 50 degrees Celsius below zero with Mongolian shepherds and the weakest sheep. I stayed at the flooded house of the farmers in Bangladesh, and I saw people piled up in Ulaanbaatar and Dhaka. Kenya is a different background. Here, the drought is causing daily wars between nomadic shepherds, and the violence is spreading. People fight to use and control water and pastures. So here as well, many people move to the capital, Nairobi. Refugees or environmental migrants, international rights give no name and no status to the people portrayed in my pictures. I just want to give them a face, I just want to give them a voice. Thank you.